that. So let me start over. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful event that we're about to share together with one another. Um, my name is Ken Altenbach, and I'm coming from you to all of you from the beautiful, beautiful, picturesque town of Danville, Pennsylvania. I want to welcome each and every one of you beautiful people to season 4 Ultimate Coach Book Reading Event in community. So I just got to sit back for a second and I got to take all of this in. This is my first event of the year. I may I attended some of them last year or the last events in season number 3, and I just want to take this in for a moment. What an experience to see so many beautiful faces here tonight. I am humbled to be in the presence of so many beautiful souls. So I'm going to do a little things a little bit differently starting this off here. So right now, I'm going to ask each of you a favor. Would each of you please take a moment and go ahead and unmute yourselves right now? So I'm going to say this with so much excitement here tonight. I am going to say, let's kick things off with a big round of applause for the incredible and inspiring ultimate author Amy Hardison, Alan D. Thompson, who poured their hearts into creating the Book of Being. So let's give them a round of applause for doing that. Let's hear it. They're the reasons we are sitting here tonight sharing with one another. And of course, we cannot forget to give a virtual high five, yeah, and a virtual fist pump and a virtual cheer to the incredible Mr. Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach himself, for the profound impact he continues to make in each of our lives.
Amen.
So let's give it to him. So thank you all for indulging me in that. Thank you for starting this off with some excitement. Thank you for going ahead and giving your applause and acknowledging the people that created the reason why we're here tonight. Now, please allow me to take a few moments to thank you personally, Ms. Teresa Holdaway, for saying yes as our guest reader tonight for chapter 3 titled Growing Up. For those of you who do not know, Ms. Holdaway is Steve's older sister. She is brilliant and filled with incredible wisdom. In fact, she probably had to put that brilliance and wisdom to good use on a multiple occasions while dealing with a younger brother who saw life as one big adventurous playground. So welcome, Teresa. Thank you for giving us your soul. Thank you for giving us your wisdom tonight. And a personal thank you for being part of a group that you're involved in. I am so happy I'm here to learn from you and to grow with you as we move forward in this great adventure. Now, the Book of Being isn't just a book. It's globe-trotting, mind-expanding, heart-opening adventure. It's planting seeds of transformational international around the very essence of being. And guess what? It's creating a seismic impact, rip-roaring effect on those brave souls who dare to read this remarkable book. A book all about themselves. Now let's get into the spirit of this event. As we embark on the journey together, please take a moment and share in the chat where you're joining us from. Let's see how far and wide our community stretches. So take a moment to do that, would you? Iowa, Idaho, South Florida, California, Sterling, Hawaii, Canada, welcome, Arizona, Michigan, Ecuador, welcome, Arizona again, New York, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. But I want to let you know, we're not done yet. There's more excitement to come. Now, please take a moment to share in the chat one thing you got that got you fired up about diving into the Ultimate Coach book in this community. Share your enthusiasm and let's build some collective, electrifying buzz together tonight. Take a moment to go ahead and do that for me, please. The document, intuition, the creation of being, learning about being, not enthusiasm, but presence, belonging. Who do I have to be? Revelation of being. Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing this. Okay, before we dive into this book reading tonight, I want to take a moment to acknowledge each and every one of you for being here tonight. Your presence in this co-created space is like a bright star in our constellation of growth and learning. And as Steve encourages us, let's set our intention for this book reading to expand our state of being and become the best versions of ourselves. Now, gotta say, got a little bit of a housekeeping reminder. While acknowledging each other is fantastic, let's keep this space focused on you. If you feel compelled to acknowledge someone, we encourage you to connect with them privately and deepen that connection. We want to maintain the integrity of this sacred space for you to explore your own insights and share your unique journey. Let me say that again. Explore your own insights and share your unique journey. Please be aware that as you are sharing and you were to start to share from an idea of someone not you, we may lovingly guide you back to share about you. So thank you for understanding this. Now, we remember when you read about you. When you listen about you. And when it's time to share about you. As it's been shared before, in the wise words of Byron Katie, all we experience about anyone else is the idea we have of them. So let's keep it personal and authentic. Awesome. Once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being present. I love you all. Now, let the adventure begin, and let's make this book reading event a lively, engaging, and transformational experience for all of us. At this time, I would like to turn this over to Miss Elizabeth Forrest, who will help guide you further in our journey tonight. Thank you.
All right. How can we not be excited about tonight after that exciting intro? Ken, thank you so much. I don't know about y'all, but I'm pumped. First of all, I'd love to say thank you for coming and being in this space tonight. I'm so excited for each and every one of you. I want to say thank you to Teresa for sharing this evening with us and being our guest reader. And at this time, if there's anybody who's new, this is your first book reading, I'd invite you to either drop in the chat. This is my first time. You can raise your hand if you want to scroll down to the bottom of your screen. You can also put up your virtual hand. Go under the reaction tab and click on raise hand. So if there's anybody that's new, go ahead and raise your hand or drop it in the chat. I see a couple ones, Joey, and is it Dejir? Who else we got in here? Debbie, are you new? Is this your first one? Seeing a couple. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So for everybody who's new and everybody who's been here before, I'd love to see your book. If you could hold up your copy and let me see if you've got that book. We're going to find some people to volunteer to read tonight. I see all kinds of people. Who do we got on this other screen? Good, good, good. Any of our brand new people want to read tonight? No, that's okay. Joey? Joey says absolutely. He would love to. Would you be interested in reading the back cover of the book? Perfect. So we'll have you read the back cover of the book, and then what about anybody else? Anybody else want to volunteer to read this evening that maybe hasn't read before? Anybody feeling called?
There is a hand raised.
Got a hand up.
I'm
Vanessa,
peeking- Vanessa,
see
there we
her
go.
hand
You're on my other
Vanessa?
page.
And
Okay.
I see Dajir.
Dajir still has his hand up. Okay. Dajir, are you wanting to also read? I don't see anything. All right.
I
So
think
then
it's
Vanessa. Okay, Vanessa, I'll have you read the first 2 pages of the book. Okay, so what we're going to do in true fashion, what we usually do is we'll have the first reader go ahead and read the back questions on the book. So when you read Joey, go ahead and read about yourself. When you're done reading, we'll go right into Vanessa. Vanessa will take the first 2 pages. She'll read about herself, and then Miss Teresa is going to take it away for us. All right. So when you are listening, I encourage each and every one of you to listen about yourself. I encourage each and every one of you to find a question that really resonates with you. If there's something that's really coming to you, drop it in the chat and just focus on those questions. This is all about you in this space. This is all about your growth, your journey. We're so excited that you're here with us tonight. And with that, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. And again, thank you, Teresa, for volunteering to be our reader tonight for the chapter 3, or it's growing up. So go ahead and take it away, Joey.
Cool. Please do not read this book about me. Read this book about you. Read it about being. As you read, ask yourself, who would I need to be a more loving person? Who would I need to be a more effective parent? Who would I need to be to create a level of confidence that is remarkable? Who would I need to be at peace with who I am? Who would I need to be fully in love with myself and my life? Who would I need to live the most extraordinary life I can live? I promise you that if you read this book with the intention of expanding your state of being, you will do exactly that. Your experience will be remarkable. Who you are being is everything. Loving you, be blessed, be you.
Is before you begin. That part, okay. Before you begin. I never want to write a book, and I haven't. I never want to have a book written about me, but here it is. This book is a gift from my wife, Amy, who wrote it, and my friend Alan D. Thompson, who conducted the research and interviews on which it is based. And it's not just a gift to me, but to you too. And now you are reading it. So with your permission, I'll give you some suggestions on how to read it. You see, this isn't an ordinary book. It's not simply a biography. It's not a self-help book. It's not a literary classic. It's definitely not a book about how to coach. In fact, it's not a book about doing anything. It's a book about being. And it's a book about you. To access this book, ask yourself these questions as you read. Who am I being as a partner, parent, or friend? Who am I being as a leader? Who am I being as a member of my community? Who would I need to be to have miracles show up in my daily life? Who would I need to be to create value in the work I do? Who would I need to be to generate a life of abundance? Who would I need to be to alter my relationship with fear? Who would I need to be at peace with my past? Who would I need to be to step powerfully into my future? Who would I need to be present as a way of being? Who would I need to be to live the most extraordinary life I can live? Who would I need to be to know that my life makes a difference? Who would I need to be fully in love with myself and my life? Who would I need to be to improve my relationships with the most important people in my life? Who would I need to be to read The Ultimate Coach and have a personal breakthrough in being wonderful me? The best part about this book about you, is that it is endless. The story goes on, and it's written by your being. Loving you, be blessed, be you, Steve Hartson. Thank you.
Chapter 3, Growing Up. Steve was taking in his environment, desks, chalkboard, potential friends, and a teacher, with an uncanny resemblance to Granny and the Beverly Hillbillies. First grade was going to be okay. Then he saw his mother walk by the open door of his classroom. She was leaving. Steve darted out the door and wrapped his arms around her legs. It took a bevy of adults to pry him loose. His teacher, Mrs. Smith, scolded him. His mother walked away. Steve stilled his soul. He was going to have to do this thing on his own. Steve wasn't totally alone. Because of their frequent moves and the emotional turmoil in the family, Steve's brother, Phil, struggled in school. Maureen thought it best for Phil to repeat the first grade. Since Steve and Phil were only 13 months apart, they both started first grade in Pioneer Elementary in 1961. They would attend all 12 years together, often in the same classes. In many ways, school was a trying time for Steve. He couldn't tell the difference between a lowercase L and the number 1. He struggled with long division in junior high. He missed the day when his algebra teacher explained variables. And when he returned to school, the X's and the Y's on the chalkboard, he was baffled. More challenging was Steve's frustration. When Steve's mom was home in the evenings and available to help him with his homework, too often the experience was a corkscrew to hell. When frustrated, he would scream and throw things. When he screamed and threw things, his mom refused to help him and walked away. When she walked away, Steve felt like his words and frustration were shoved down his throat. Unresolved, they became combustible. Sometimes he punched holes in the walls. Steve remembers hearing his mom say that he was hyperactive. He didn't know what hyperactive meant, but he was pretty sure it wasn't a compliment. He also knew that sitting at a desk for 7 hours a day and only talking when the teachers called on him was a formidable task. Some teachers were understanding. Mrs. Gailey extended love and kindness to him. Other teachers said things like, "Put a rag in that kid's mouth." That was humiliating, but Steve concealed it with bravado. There were parts of school that Steve loved: math, physical education, recess, story time, and all the social aspects of school. He also enjoyed the expanded opportunity for mischief. Steve and his friends often put a rock in the threshold of the cafeteria door so the door wouldn't completely shut. Later, when all the teachers, janitors, and administrators were gone home, Steve and his friends crept back into the cafeteria and helped themselves to all the cookie dough, chocolate milk, and orange juice they wanted. Before Pioneer Elementary School had centralized heating, they used fireplaces to heat the classrooms. Many of these fireplaces had been bricked in by 1960. In Steve's 6th grade classroom, the fireplace was extant, but was used to store the soccer balls and sporting equipment used during recess. One time when Steve's teacher left the room, Steve and a friend climbed into the fireplace and up the chimney, using the casing for electrical wiring as a handhold. The ascent was going well until Steve accidentally pulled the casing from the wall. The school was immediately shrouded in darkness. Steve and his friend dashed back to their desks and assumed innocence. No one ratted them out, showing the influence that Steve had with his peers. It took the school maintenance man a long time to pinpoint the source of the outage. Maureen. Maureen completed a bachelor's degree in business administration and secured a job as an executive housekeeper for the Roadway Inn. Presumably, a daytime job in management would significantly improve the family's finances and give Maureen more time at home. It helped, but Maureen was now commuting to and from Salt Lake each day, and she worked long hours. The 1963 Kennedy report revealed that women earned 59 cents for every dollar that men earned, and that the more lucrative positions were closed to women. Finances were still strained. Maureen would have thrived had she become, excuse me, let's start again. Maureen would have thrived had she come of age professionally a few decades later. She had an intuitive sense for business. Her employees loved her and worked hard for her. If they fell short, she held them accountable. She had an uncanny ability to size people up after speaking with them for a few minutes. She had a work ethic equal to her pioneer ancestors and to her hardworking parent farmers. I am not going to try to say that word. She boosted her natural abilities by reading business and motivational books and participating in business associations. She was capable, decisive, and astute, a natural leader. Maureen dated and had offers to marry, but she was hesitant to complicate the family's dynamics. She would eventually remarry, but not until all of her children married. In the meantime, she enjoyed the honks that she got from passing cars as she mowed her lawn in her short shorts and low-cut t-shirts. Steve was mortified, especially when his friends drove by. Working hard was the norm for everyone in the Hardison household. Each Saturday, Maureen left the kids a long list of tasks to complete. Sometimes Steve would ask for extra jobs to earn money to buy something he longed for. On one occasion, he wanted cowboy boots. Steve did all the contracted tasks, but when it came time to pay him, Maureen didn't have any money. That was a bitter pill. Steve also worked for his mom's approval and to appease his tendency to OCD. He brushed the carpet in his room with a hand brush to keep the net just right. Before cell phones and their predecessor, cordless phones, phones were either mounted on the walls or attached to the walls via cords. If you wanted to talk, you were tethered to the wall. If Maureen got a phone call, Steve would take advantage of her temporary stillness. He would lean across her lap and lift up the back of his t-shirt so she could rub his back. These were solid gold moments, attention from his mother and being touched. They were rare, also rare, but definitely part of Steve's childhood were those times when the stress was too much. Maureen could snap. "I'm losing it," she warned. Once unhinged, she could be fierce. Maureen thought it was important that her children get religion. She would send the kids to church with Ellen and JP, or she would drop them off. Steve lingered at the door of the church until Maureen was out of sight. Then he made a beeline to the nearest Chevron station, shinnied up the tree, and perched. For the next hour, Steve watched cars go by and daydreamed. That was the way Steve liked his religion. On one occasion, Steve intentionally left his dress shoes at school in spite of his mother's reminder to bring them home so he could wear them to church. Not to be outmaneuvered, Maureen insisted Steve wear his sister's shoes. Steve kept those pointy canvas shoes tucked deep under the pew. He couldn't get out of church fast enough. For years, Maureen's life had been physically hard and emotionally stressful, and she wore out too soon. At least once a quarter, she would come home from work too weak to get out of the car and walk to the house. She would honk and Steve would come out and help her in. When Steve was 12, he was playing baseball at Pioneer Elementary School. He was up to bat, waiting for the pitch. He heard someone say, "We need Steve Hardison. His mother is sick." He dropped the bat and sprinted through the alfalfa field, the shortest way home. When he got home, his mom was in bed. Steve does not remember what laid her low, but he was terrified. When Steve was 17, Maureen had a stroke. She was only 46. She lost her eyesight and was paralyzed on one side. Steve bathed her and helped her to the bathroom. Eventually, her sight and mobility returned. In between those health crises, Maureen frequently lamented that she was sure she was dying. Each time she foretold her demise, Steve blanched. What would happen if Maureen died? There was no father to turn to. Steve was terrified. The farm. Steve and Phil spent a lot of time on the farm. JP recruited them to pick beans, pull weeds, and be his gophers. Sometimes Steve had to help JP castrate bulls and cut the horns off of cows. Steve watched as Grandpa picked up chickens and wrung their neck, and as Uncle Myron put a bullet in a cow's head so it could be butchered. Such things are part and parcel of farm life, but they disturb Steve's sensitive soul. Steve managed to have fun even while working. One day when JP, Phil, and Steve were picking string beans, Steve pelted his grandpa with beans and then quickly turned to picking, feigning innocence in industry. JP stood up, looked around, but couldn't identify the culprit. After the third assault, JP walked to the nearest grandchild and kicked Phil in the butt. He fell into the green beans, puzzled by his grandpa's random smack. Sometimes Steve was at the receiving end of the jokes. Rob recalls, our grandfather's farm had milking cows. Cows leave fresh cow pies. Once I held Steve up by his ankles and dipped his head into the cow poop. Steve didn't think it was funny. Ellen and JP's house, as well as Maureen, sat on the western edge of the farm. Behind the houses were all the structures of a farm, a barn, a milk house, a chicken coop, tool sheds and storage for their wheat, and a garage-like structure for the farm equipment. Behind the tool shed was an 8 by 10 foot lean-to that Grandpa used for extra storage. It didn't have a door, just an opening to walk through. The floor consisted of slats of rough-hewn wood. Sunlight filtered through the spaces between the 1x4s of the walls. Inside were horse bridles, harnesses, and odds and ends. This lean-to, or the shed as Steve called it, was a refuge for Steve. He would sit there for hours. He would meditate. He would watch the dust particles float in the sunlight and think the image looked like the universe. Sometimes he would cry, but mostly he thought. And he thought about his thoughts. Steve said, I would sit there and I would ask, what's life all about? Why is it like this? I've always been thoughtful about thinking. I remember wondering, there's thoughts in there. Who's doing that? Sports. Steve's favorite way to channel his energy was through sports. Steve's father had been a Golden Glove boxer and an outstanding baseball player. Steve and Phil inherited the natural talent. By the time Phil was in the 9th grade, he could throw a runner out at home plate from center field. Steve, who played catcher, could zing the ball to second base when a player on first had attempted to steal. The opposing teams weren't expecting arms like that we're not expecting arms like that on 14-year-olds. Steve and Phil spent hours playing baseball, but also watching pro baseball on TV. Afterwards, they went out and practiced the strategy they observed. One coach told Rob that he worked hard to get his players to understand the strategy that Phil and Steve instinctively grasped. The coach also left a word of warning with Rob about Steve. That brother of yours, he better watch his mouth. He's a smartass. Steve's favorite baseball memory was hitting 3 home runs in an all-star game. Steve also loved football and basketball. He was a gifted athlete, but what gave him his edge was his desire and intensity. Steve remembers, I would take out all of my frustrations and all of my disappointments on the football field. I remember tackling one guy and accidentally breaking his leg. Music. Stephen channeled his energy through sports, but he soothed his soul through music. He was constantly listening to music through all the mediums then available, the radio, record players, 8-track tapes while in the car. He would listen to music to fall asleep. He would listen to music as soon as he woke up. He could identify a song after hearing 2 chords. The first concert Steve attended was an Atomic Rooster concert, a hard rock band from London. This was a big deal for Steve, and he wanted to look his best. He wore his white bell-bottom pants with creases down the front. When he walked in and looked around, Steve saw everybody was in standard hippie attire, ripped jeans, beads, and leather vests. It looked like Donny Osmond had just walked into a Metallica concert. Girls. Steve was a charmer and a bit of a heartbreaker. Jamie recalls, every day as soon as he got home from school, the phone at our house would start ringing. The girls were calling. At that time, the place to be in Clearfield on Friday night was the Admiral Theater, where the preteens would hang out and catch the current movie. Right next to the Admiral Theater was Chandler Rexall Drug, where kids would stock up on candy for the movie. They also sold friendship rings for $1. Steve bought one each Friday night and gave it to a new girl each Saturday. Occasionally, he bought 2 and had 2 girlfriends at the same time. These were not deep relationships. They wouldn't even qualify as puppy love. Still, it is in the telling that Steve can count 66 girls of this variety. Carol McGrath remembers Steve inviting her into the treehouse in his backyard. 11-year-old Steve leaned in to give her a romantic kiss. Just before their lips touched, he whipped out a Kleenex from his pocket and put it between their lips. You can never be too careful about germs. When Steve was 14 or 15, he went to Cedar City, Utah to play in a state championship tournament in the Babe Ruth Baseball League. After practice, Steve and his teammates hit on the local girls. The girls flirted back, and soon the Clearfield boys and the Cedar City girls were walking together down Main Street. Things were going well until the hometown boys saw them and their alpha anger surged. The Cedar City boys jumped in a car, drove towards the Cedar City boys jumped in a car, drove towards the outsiders and gunned it. Steve and his friends fled into a park and shook off their pursuers. Steve was cute, and his baby blues were framed by eyelashes that looked like he had crimped them with an eyelash curler. He was athletic, magnetic, and already had a vibe that said he was going places. Just beneath that vibe, there was one that said, "Don't mess with me." With all that, it was easy for Steve to pull off cool. He naturally had it. However, in 6th grade, his cool was threatened. "I thought everybody wearing glasses looked dorky," Steve recalls, yet he knew his vision was subpar. On the day of the school eye test, he memorized the eye chart. "It seemed smart at the time. I started wearing glasses in 8th grade, but I needed them in 6th. Talking. Steve inherited traits from both parents that have served him well his whole life. From his mother, he got a keen intuition and a sense of business, leadership, and managing people. She instilled in him a prodigious work ethic. Most propitiously, he inherited her ability to read people. Steve got his father's athleticism, persuasive charm, and outgoing nature, and the penchant for talking. By the time he was 12, he could wax lyrical about anything. On his 2nd grade report card, his teacher, Miss Guyver, comments, "Steve is a good student. The only thing that is a problem is his talking." A mother of one of Steve's friends banned him from sleepovers because he talked too much. North Davis Junior High. 2 photos of Steve from junior high are telling. The first is a picture of the 8th grade class officers. Steve is the class president. He's positioned between his vice president and secretary, 2 girls who look more like juniors in high school than 8th graders. Since the girls tower over him by about 6 inches, it looks like Steve's sitting down. Steve is standing. The second picture is Steve's 8th grade photo. He's wearing a suit. He was the only boy in junior high wearing a suit for the sheer pleasure of it. Maybe ever. It's a hallmark Steve Hardison. 8th grade was a banner year. Steven started on football, basketball, and baseball teams. He was a class officer. He was confident, even cocky, adored by girls, gregarious and popular. But in 9th grade, things started to unravel. By 10th grade at Clearfield High, his inner world was shattered. All his male friends' voices were cavern deep. They were adding muscles and inches to their frames. Steve looked like a little boy. It's a hard thing to hide, especially in the locker room. One day after a tough loss against a rival junior basketball team, Steve's angst came out in tears. His coach, Carl Clayton, approached him. "Hardison, are you that upset about the loss?" "No, it's not that. Coach, what if I never grow?" "You don't need to worry about that," responded Clayton. "You're going to be at least 6'4". I played baseball with your played baseball with your dad at Hillfield. Your body is just like his. You are going to grow." Steve was shocked on 2 accounts. First, he had never met anyone outside of the family members who knew his father. Second, he was astonished at the prediction. Steve graduated high school at 5'8". 3 years later, he was 6'4". Steve's crisis of confidence must be put in context. His innate confidence may have taken a hit, but no one other than Steve noticed it. He still had his swagger, certainty, and arrogance. That is as fixed in Steve as his blood type. Consider an incident that occurred when Steve was in 8th grade. He was walking down the hall at North Davis Junior High when he spied a boy flirting with his girlfriend. Infuriated, Steve walked up to the boy, who was much bigger than Steve, with his dukes in fighting position. Steve demanded to know what he was doing, and next Steve barked, "Do you want to fight?" thinking his rival would back down. The boy landed an uppercut right to Steve's jaw. Steve's bottom teeth went through his tongue, and there was blood everywhere. One punch had taken Steven out. Indomitable as ever, Steve spat out, "Have you had enough?"
Can't hear you, darling.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I unplugged my headphone set, so I'm on regular speaker. Joey, would you like to go ahead and share? I see he stepped away. He's back.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible because every time I read it, more and more and more, I think it becomes about me. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like, the first time I read it, obviously following instructions, and I picked up the book and I really, I couldn't put it down. I almost read the whole thing in one sitting. And since then, I don't know how many times I've read it, but it's incredible because each time I literally feel like I'm reading it or listening to it for the first time. And each time I do, it feels like it becomes more and more about me. It starts to sink in that the book is about you.
I love that. I feel
Thank
like
you.
a lot of us can relate to that and how
Good.
the more we read this book about ourselves and experience it about ourselves, the
Mhm.
more that we gain from it with each opportunity to go deeper,
Absolutely.
especially in this space. Thank
Mhm.
you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Vanessa, would you like to share?
Yes, we'll try. I was thinking about the part where it says the only thing that is any problem is talking. And I'm thinking about me that I always love to talk to people a lot. And sometimes, even right now, I love to talk, but I'm feeling like really hard to me because I'm talking in English. And in Spanish, I experience this sometimes that maybe sometimes people told me that I used to talk too much when I was younger or a child. But right now, talking or everything that I do when I express myself, talking is what makes me help other people. It's what helped me to bring more people to me and create my community, the community that I'm creating in my country. So I was thinking about that, and also about the part where he says, it says, I would sit there and ask, what life all about? Why is like this? I've always been thoughtful about thinking. I remember wondering, and I always feel this way. I'm always like thinking about my thoughts and watching them, like how you do to think like that. And if you are right now creating this, what you want to create? What is the next thought you want to create? So this is what I take from this reading. Thank you.
Beautiful share. Thank you.
Teresa, would you like to share?
Sure. This chapter really takes me on a nostalgic trip back home when I read this one, because there's some of the fun things with Steve that's there. I had forgotten what a germaphobe he was for a period of time. And so the thing with the tissue with the girl in the backyard, that was really funny to me. He had told that story before, but I'd forgotten it till I reread it in this book. But that wasn't as easy as you might think. Is this still about me if I tell you about our tree in the backyard? Okay, because it was my tree too. So our brother Rob, and this is a huge oak tree. I mean, it is like 30 feet tall. It's huge. It's a huge tree, large, huge branches. So our brother Rob is a genius when it comes to building forts and all other kinds of things. So he put in the wooden stairs to go up the side of the tree. And I do not know how he got these cross beams up there, but there were two probably 10 to 12 foot cross beams that were placed along the heavy branches. And then he built a little clubhouse up in there. So this was like super dangerous, and you had to crawl across those planks on your knees to get from one side to the other and to get into the clubhouse. So my understanding is that this romantic kiss took place mid-plank. So it even makes it more funny to me when I know where he's at when this happened. And I remember his telling about that when he was younger. Sometimes when you get together and you start sharing the old stories, that was one of his. But I had forgotten what a germaphobe he was for a period of time. I think in our family, I think all of us at one point had a really bad temper. So when I don't think he's the only one that ever punched one of our walls, because I remember dodging forks that were being, catapulted from Stephen and Philip at me for some reason. So each time I go into this book, it isn't. So now where I am at this point in my life, see, it's not about dysfunction. I actually have a fun time going back there because I remember some of these things. And Stephen is a numbers man. If you can figure out the ring thing, Admiral Theater was a great place to go, and to have the Rexall drug right next door. And he literally did. Stephen did the weirdest thing with girls. I got to tell you, they were like all stacked up, and to have 66 friendship rings out there is not amazing. It's like what he did in those days. So the fun that he is comes out in this chapter in small pieces like that. But there's also a real sad thing. And it was a sadness that at this time, the point for when he's talking about not growing and the other boys were having a deep voice, I was married and not living in the house, but he would come. He was a real good uncle to my daughter. And I remember how heartbreaking that was for him to be so much smaller. It makes me remember times in my life when you had those deep things that really hurt, and there's really nobody to help you with it because it's just your own thing. And that's what growth was to him. That was really trying for me with this book reading. Going with the questions on the back, mine was, who would I need to be a beneficial support to Stephen? And so that's who's before you is just, that's what I created that for myself, wanting to be a support to my brother. I've loved being able to do that. Also wanted to share, our street wasn't a very busy street, but so it wouldn't be very often that someone might see my mother out mowing the lawn scantily dressed. But my mother had a very good figure. She had a lot of cleavage and she liked to show it off. And so that was a private place and she could get sun at the same time. So when I picture Maureen out there doing her thing, it just makes me laugh too. It makes me smile. She was really a woman ahead of her time. I am so proud to have that. She was my mom. I'm so happy she was my mom. She was such a different kind of person. And let's see, the phone. Now, see, it's just talking about Stephen, but we tried to get Mom. In our kitchen, there's a big window, the sink's underneath it. there's a cabinet space about the length that someone my mom's size, and she was about 5'7", could sit up on the countertop, stretch her legs out, and have her back on a cabinet that ran this way. So that's where she would perch to be on the telephone. Perfect height for you then to throw your body over her legs and pull up your shirt. She always had long manicured fingernails. And so it's not like you were getting a back rub. It's like you were getting one of those tickle things. And it makes me laugh now because Amy's stuck now doing that on Steve's arm all the time. So I think that's where that came from. But it was whoever, when that was one of the times, it's cool that it's stated in the book that way, but that wasn't just for him. That's where each one of us felt. When mom went on the phone, it was like if you were present, you went for her lap to get that back rub. And the shoes, they were mine. He was forced to wear my shoes to church. You just didn't, my mom would not be outmaneuvered. She just wouldn't. And the fact is that the strength that she was, isn't it funny that he actually showed up in church in those shoes? That tells you the kind of strength that our mom was, but also she was respected more than Steve maybe lets on. Those are the things that came out of this. Outside of his practical selfish genius, we all have a little bit of that running through us. You definitely wouldn't want us playing mischief on any of you. Yes, we can all pull a good job on that. And the talking too much. I once had, in those days, people weren't so guarded. So for me, my first classes I did get in the 6th grade, and I traveled by bus from Clearfield, Utah to Ogden, to downtown Ogden on Washington Boulevard to the Standard Optical there. I still remember it was Dr. Frost that did the examination. And he asked if he gave me a quarter, would I shut up? So I think it was in our whole family, the busy mouth. But I think it's ironic that Stephen has made such a wonderful life out of his mouth, especially with all of the teachers that had so much to say. He really was a mouthy kid, both he and Phil were. So, but wonderful that he could put it to good use and to have a wonderful life that he has made from that. So I don't really have anything other than happy stuff, because this chapter makes me laugh about our life and some of the stuff that went on. So that's what I have to share. And if you have any reasonable questions, if it feels good that you want to ask a question of a sister, wait till the after party and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. But I also have to realize that Steve's my brother, so good questions. Thank you for asking me to read. It's always a pleasure to support you, pleasure to support my brother.
Thank you so much for that, Teresa. I always love hearing more stories about Steve and your guys' childhood and growing up. And it just reminds me, of all of my siblings, as I had 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and just the crazy shenanigans that we pulled, and just those memories that are priceless. And when you do get back together, just to see all of those stories like live out all over again, it's so much fun. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Gurpreet, would you like to share?
Yes. First of all, I want to acknowledge I'm super grateful, Teresa, to hear the story from you about Steve. This is my, this is my second book reading session, and I'm just so grateful to be in this group. What happened to me when I was in the first book reading, and then second I missed, I had a commitment, a family commitment prior. And today, when I was super excited to be on this call, and I was, as Teresa was reading it, I felt like, gosh, yes, especially reading that back page and the first page of the book, or the first 2 pages of the book, that is just incredible. I feel like, oh my gosh, I read the first chapter and the second chapter twice, but when I heard, people reading the back of the book and the first 2 pages, I don't know, it just hit me. as Teresa started reading the book, and my memories just started coming back about my childhood. And sorry, I'm gonna get emotional here, but and so many things came up that I felt like were unresolved in me, or were something that I just, kind of shoved it under the rug, good and bad, like positive and negative. And I almost feel like I want to take the time and write my own story based on every chapter that Steve has shared or Amy has shared. And in the same format, the same subtitles, music. I have a story about music. I have a story about games, about sports, about, talking. And I feel like, gosh, I could really be writing a just tremendous autobiography about my own self. And I'm a published author on Amazon, but I have never ever imagined writing something like this. So thank you again for, this incredible group. It's just really changing my life.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful share. Tom, would you like to share next?
I would love to. I'm sitting here. I am actually, you can't tell, but I am laughing. Pretty good inside, because I was extremely mischievous, and I went through at least 5 or 6 things, and if I sat here longer, I'd come up with another 5 or 6. But I'm going to share one that when I was about 16 years old, I was working in a restaurant, a really, really busy restaurant, and I was a dishwasher. And the dishwashers had the job of changing out the beer kegs. So they'd say Stroh's out, and we'd run up there and we'd take the Stroh's. We'd bring a new Stroh's, hook it up, and take the empty one out. But what we used to do all the time is we'd go in there with the new Stroh's, take out the old one, but then we'd unhook the Lowenbrau. And then a few minutes later, Lowenbrau. And so then we'd run up there with a keg of Lowenbrau, and then we'd put on the back dock a half a keg of Lowenbrau. And then we'd come back after the restaurant closed with our little tapper, and we'd have a little party on the back dock drinking the Lowenbrau that we put out there as a 16-year-old on the back dock of this restaurant. And then I literally have another dozen of these kinds of stories. And reading, hearing Teresa, I love you, hearing you read, the experience and then the share, I just started flooding back. It was weird. I was reading about Steve for the first few minutes, and then all of a sudden it just flipped and it was about me. And then my last thought that I'm having right now is that I want to go back to those days. I want to go do something mischievous this week. And Tanya, you got to ask me what it is. And it's going to be a good one. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to be a shit disturber this week somewhere. Complete.
Oh, never a dull moment with Tom around. Wolfgang, would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, first, the book reading makes it really very special. Like, Teresa, thank you for being here. It's like, there is a feeling of, there is a really deep connection to that story. But what it connected for me today was like, I mean, there is the fun and the things we did in that time. But what it connected for me today was when I hear it from what Steve experienced, and I hear it about me, I feel how lost I was in that time as well. As especially, I had a father, but he was very busy building our home. So basically, being a boy and not having a role model as a man around, what it actually means to for instance, when I hear the thing about the girls, it's funny, but it's also kind of lostness how to behave actually properly in because I didn't see how my father treated my mom respectfully and loving. So I had to find my way, but that certainly also came through a lot of disrespect and misbehaving. That was covered in fun, but actually it was also sometimes not funny. So that came up for me today, thinking about where I felt lost and had to find my way on my own, where I would have actually wished to have some guidance. I'm complete.
Thank you for that share. David, would you like to share?
Sure. I had that similar feeling. People would ask me in high school, they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is a usual question. And I would say 6'2", and it never happened, not even close. I was 5'6" in my best days, and many years ago before I started drinking. So never quite got there. When Steve took those videos in Mumbai, I was like, he's taking my camera. Oh, that's what it looks like to be 6'4", because he's looking at over the tops of people. Never had that happen. But Tom reminded me of stories of things that we would do as kids. I remember my mother one time asked me to throw out the wastebasket. What she meant, of course, was to empty it. But I took her kind of literally, and I emptied it, and then I hid it to make it seem like I had thrown out the wastebasket. And my mother finally, about 3 or 4 days later, said, "Did you throw out the wastebasket?" And I said, "Well, here, that's." And I said, "No, it's over here," where it was eventually. And then I would do things like, we were going to a wedding, and we all us kids had to polish our shoes in the kitchen. We had parquet floors. And when I was done polishing my shoes, I put them on, clomped through the dining room, and then clomped up the stairs, 12 stairs, and my parents were getting ready in their room, and I clomp down the hallway to their, very, very distinctly clomping with my shoes, and I knock on their door, and my mother says, "What is it?" And I said, "Was I supposed to polish the bottoms of my shoes?" Now, I hadn't polished the bottoms of my shoes, and I didn't say that I did, but I just asked if I was supposed to. This is one of those things where if you ask the question properly, you can get a response without actually saying that you actually did it. So instead of saying, "I polished the bottoms of my shoes, I said, "Was I supposed to polish them?" Didn't, the question, the way you ask the question and get the reaction, and kids like to get reactions. I was one of them, but never got higher, never got larger than 5'6" on tiptoes. Might have been 5'8", but I'm sure I'm shorter than that now. Best days I was 5'6". It was funny. I was looking at Steve, taking those pictures from Mumbai. It was like he's looking, and people from India are relatively short anyway. They're kind of like my height, and he's looking over everybody. That's what it's like to be 6'4". Anyway, I think I'm complete.
Thank you for that share, David. I'm in the same boat as you. I don't think I'm ever going to know what it's like to be 6'4". But I will say my nephew is 6'4", and when we'd go give him big hugs after his football game, I was right at armpit height. Not a good height. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to share? Anybody feel compelled to share this evening that hasn't? Martha.
I just listening to this chapter once again, and coming from one of 5 kids, I'm reminded of how when I sit with my brother and my sisters and we start talking about our childhood, how each of us has a different perception of the same story that we're talking about. Each of us has internalized it in one way or another. However, to what you said earlier, Teresa, we laugh a lot. There are some tears, definitely, of some things that have happened, but we laugh a lot about the shenanigans that took place at our younger age. And so this chapter is just really sweet, and especially hearing you speak of it makes it come alive so much more vividly. So yeah, it's a beautiful chapter. Thank you.
Thank you for that share, Martha. Daniel, would you like to share?
I would, thank you. I resonated a lot with this chapter, in part because I don't know if mischievous is the right word. I was bordered on criminal, I think, when I was younger. So, and exactly, we're very similarly to Steve. I went and broke into my elementary school with a couple of my buddies. And it was just so wonderful to be in that cafeteria with nobody else there. That didn't sort of end well, but it was fun at the time. And I was also similarly obsessed with sports. And so that's like, I think a big percentage of my life was either watching sports or practicing or playing on the teams. Though I note like one curious difference for me was that I was just not into fighting. Like even at this point in my life, I've never had a fist fight. My small claim to fame with that, though, is when I was in 7th grade, I was in science class and a bunch of boys came running into the class and said, "I heard you're fighting David Grohl right now in the boys' bathroom." And I was too ashamed to say no. I had no idea. Like we, as far as I knew, we were all cool. But I was like, okay, yeah. And went into the boys' bathroom and there's 15 boys standing around and David's on the other side of the bathroom. And then I'm thinking like, what the hell are we doing? There's like, I have no reason to fight him. I don't fight anyone. And then he sort of started to come at me and I just put my foot up like, nope, I'm not going to do this. And it was a embarrassing at the time moment, but as David Grohl grew famous, I thought, well, that was a nice little brush with my friend. And then ironically, his mother was my teacher who encouraged me so much into writing that really changed my life. So yeah, I appreciate this chapter for me for the recollections and also the mix. Like for me, there was a lot of loneliness and figuring stuff out on my own. And also a lot of goofy fun in the midst of my own childhood. So it was nice to have all that nostalgia stirred up for me too. I'm complete. Thanks, y'all.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. It's fun to go back to those childhood memories and kind of relive some of those sometimes. And not all of them are wonderful memories, but you go back and it's just part of who we are and who we've become. So I appreciate that. Anne Marie, would you like to share?
Yeah, well, I was the third out of 4 children born in 4 years to immigrant parents from completely different continents. So they did not know how to raise us in America whatsoever. And I have a thing where, I had a brother who was the golden child, and the golden child is the one where the sun shines out of his rectum and there's nothing he can do to ever displease the parents. Unlike the lost child who can do everything and never, ever, ever be seen. And I found that what happens with the golden child, since they have the great favor of the parents, is that you want to be like them, you want to be with them, you want to, emulate them. They're so fascinating. The problem was my brother was a villain. And so we all wanted to be like him. And he was like setting fires at 3 years old, once I had this tricycle, and we lived by a hill called Suicide Hill, and he got all the neighbors and sent me down Suicide Hill on a tricycle. Well, you can't pedal fast enough when you're going down a hill. So I'm like this tangled mess going down this hill, whatever. So it was like, there was a lot of mischief going on, a lot of victimization. It was interesting though, because my brothers were really creative. And then I just kind of retreated, right? Because I was like this doormat target kind of thing. And it was funny because my mom tells a story of me in first grade at Catholic school. And there was an inner playground. So the youngest children were safest. There was no way in, no way out, but the staircases. And my mom said, yes. And one day the nun called me to look over the wall at you during recess, sitting all by yourself with a lunchbox and playing with no one. Well, it was dangerous at home to play with anybody, right? So the nun says, I think your daughter has a social problem. And this is how you're going to appreciate this. My mother just said that does not run in our family. And so she ended up fixing me up with like the biggest nerd who also had no friends. And I don't know what the politically correct name for that is now, but the name when I was growing up was midget. Maybe it's vertically challenged. I'm not sure, but this was real dwarf. And so I had like, those were my friends in school. And so I got a super competitive edge, right? Because there was, there's no competition with these people as my friends, unlike PE when, I was the last one I was second to the last one picked at PE, unless the other girl was absent. And then I would be, not so, but I'd be the last one. But it's funny when I look back at my childhood and everything that I've experienced and how far I've come, I mean, it's really amazing, so thanks. Just want to share some little fun. Then these are all like before 10. It gets really fun after 13. This is the teen years where all the good stories come from. But I can't tell you those because some of them might still be looking for me as a suspect. Just
No
kidding.
incrimination here, Anne-Marie. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Andrea, would you like to share?
Yeah, I would. I love this chapter, and it really, really brings back great memories. Because I grew up in a suburb, a really waspy suburb, and I was like the only person of color at my school, and so I stood out from the beginning. And I was getting in trouble a lot. I had band-aids all on my knees because I was kind of a tomgirl, and but my parents, my mom dressed me up as a proper, in this fancy, the most inappropriate play clothes from Hong Kong, like fancy dresses and stuff, like kids don't play and that kind of stuff. And so anyways, just brought up all those kinds of things, and that how different I felt. All the other kids had like pop, and I had healthy stuff, and like tuna fish sandwiches and peanut butter and banana sandwiches and stuff. So I just wasn't normal. Everything was different. I got a gym bag, and they had brand name gym clothes and gym bag, and my mom took a rice sack and a floral thing, and she hand sewed it. And at the time I didn't appreciate any of it, but it was all just hardworking parents, and they really gave us everything. So it was just idyllic. And I remember also, so Steve's story about punching holes in the wall, having that temperament. I had a temper, and I did that too. When I got told to do something, I
I think I instead of hitting my mom, I put my fist into my bedroom door, and so yeah, there was a lot of that. And yeah, when we were in trouble, my brother and I, my mom would rattle the kitchen drawer, like they didn't hit us with a belt or anything like that, but she pretended to get like knives out of the spatula drawer to whack us when we were bad, and we ran into the closet. And I remember being in the closet with my brother. So yeah, just and another one, I had a friend who didn't have parents at home, and so we hung out together, and we didn't know that you weren't supposed to make a bonfire in the backyard, but we did, and stuff like that. Oh, the same friend, we ended up going to our first rock concert in Seattle. I live in Canada, just across the border, and we didn't know at the time you needed to be of age and to have a passport, and so we got stopped at the border, and my friend called her dad to the border, and like a rich, he was rich, and so he actually brought our stuff, and we ended up at the Kingdome in Seattle and saw like the Pretenders, and yeah, it was our first rock concert, but we did bad stuff. And yeah, so thank you, Teresa, for reading. And thank you everyone for sharing such happy memories. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Wolfgang, did you want to share again real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted again to thank Teresa for sharing so many stories. I feel that you're so transparent. You ask if there is more questions. I have the feeling there is already so much that is really the inspiring thing to look into what happened in my life, in my childhood, with my siblings, in my world. So it's already so much, and thank you for sharing all this, also intimate stories, these personal stories, and actually this book is really encouraging, like what Gurpreet said, to write their own book and to have the courage to make their own story so transparent as it was done in the book, which is much more than a biography, but really bringing sides which we wouldn't share usually, despite if they're intimidating or sexy, or just to bring them out anyway. So thank you for the inspiration and for being here and sharing that.
Thank you, Wolfgang. All right, Teresa, do you want to share anything before we kick it over to Tanya and hit the after party?
Yeah, I just wanted to, that was a thought that came to my mind. So in there, it talks about Steve taking part in castrating and the killing of the animals for butchering. The place where I'd like to look at that is, so see, here's my grandparents. My grandparents are older. My grandparents were just old all the time I ever knew them. And so here's my grandpa. And this is the same guy that you go to church with. And you see how he's a hard worker, and you drive the tractor for him when you're doing the farm work. And then you get to see a new face of him when the cow doesn't go down and he takes a 2x4 to knock it down. You start to living on a farm. I could see how, well, Steve was a lot younger than me, but it changes too. It changed my grandfather from somebody that I would listen to and be counseled by, to somebody that I had a little bit of a vein of being afraid of him, because if he could do that to a cow, what else could he possibly do in a kid's brain, you know? But attaching to that, the different way we see people, I noticed in some of the chats, there are several people that mentioned that the parents weren't there and there wasn't anybody to direct them, different things like that. And it kind of touched my heart as I was reading those, but this is the invitation that I would put out there. just right along with the fun things that you remember. And distance lends enchantment. So the older you get, you know, it seems like a lot of the hard stuff falls away and you just remember the fun things. But there was a lot of difficulty and a lot of dysfunction in our family. There's no doubt about that. But there's a time you can put that to rest. If there's anyone who haven't gone back and tried to make things good with your parents, it is real easy to hit a reset button no matter what age you are, and you don't have to go back through all of the crap. You just need to make an agreement with one another that from here we're going to start a new relationship. That's what I did with my mother at age 26. I know it's possible and I know it can be done. You just need to take the high ground and allow each other to be one another. But if you have anything that's unresolved with a parent, I would say that this book is a wonderful vehicle for you to ask who you would want to be and what you would want to leave that situation as. I had the benefit of years of my mother's time as adult women learning and loving one another because we agreed to hit the reset button. And I came to learn that my mother is one of the most objective, intelligent women that I have ever been privileged to know. That's a better understanding of who she is than I would want to keep that laundry list of her faults. A far greater place to be and a lovelier place for you to spend your time. So I would just say if the people who have unresolved issues with your parents, you know, there were just people too, and they were doing the best that they could do. And if they had known better, they would have done better. And as a part of this book reading, we're all learning how to be better. So there's no reason to have any unfinished business. People can address it, and definitely we're all strong enough and lovingly enough that we shouldn't have what didn't take place hamper a relationship in the present time. So that's just what I wanted to share. Just felt impressed to share that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing those words of wisdom with us, Teresa. All right, Tanya, I'm going to pass it over to you so we can get wrapped up and take it away, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate you leading the moderator 2 role tonight. You've done an excellent job, and thank you so much, Ken, for opening up tonight. You both of you just did an outstanding job. I'd really love to honor our 2 readers tonight for the back of the book. Joey, thank you so much for reading the back of the book. And Vanessa, thank you so much for also volunteering to read the first 2 pages of the book. And Teresa, I can't thank you enough for your impact and your sharing, your vulnerable sharing, and your willingness to share your being with us in community. The depth of wisdom that you have is truly awe-inspiring and greatly appreciated. You know, what you just shared just now about going back and cleaning it up if you have the possibility, or looking at it from a new perspective. I can't thank this book enough for coming into my life, because as other people might have shared as well in the chat, that they had a tough childhood, and for a long time, that's all I really remembered. That's really like where I sat, of just being alone or feeling shamed. And I recognized that like my level of communication was not so good, because I was told, and many of you might be able to associate with this, that children are to be seen and not heard. Or yeah, that was said to me a lot. And so I learned how to kind of zip it up. Or I remember my mom saying, if you would just shut your mouth, you would get yourself so much further ahead. You would cause less trouble for yourself. And so I learned that. I learned how to keep my mouth shut. I learned how to not really create what was a healthy boundary or using my voice at certain times. And so you see a horse picture in the back. So I really developed great relationships with animals. I could associate, or I could really connect with horses. I could really connect with animals. And so throughout this entire book, it's been able for me to go back and ask the question, who do I need to be at peace with my past and create peace with my past? And so I have taken the opportunity to go back and have conversations with certain people in my family, and to hear their perspective on things and how they saw things, and for me to be able to express my truth also has just really been able to create peace in my heart, to let go of those old stories and create now, but also to be able to share, where I felt hurt. That was important for me to at least be able to share that, and then to create mending and healing now. And so I just really thank you, Teresa, for being such a great support, because I can see fun now. I can remember so many more stories now that were fun and were maybe a little mischievous, but a lot more laughter than what I could see the first time I opened this book, or where my heart particularly was. So every time I read this book, or every time I read this chapter, there's new breakthroughs and new healing that occurs. And so I invite everyone, if there's still a part of your past that is still causing pain in you, to really, as a possibility, lean into what that looks like for healing for you, because I know it's changed my life right now, and it's about now. So with that being said, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. The book readings are a co-created space, and they wouldn't be what they are without your presence and your valuable shares. We all grow through each and every share. And we have some great announcements for you. Our next book reading will be this Sunday, October 1st, and we are reading chapter 4, At Risk. And we have the incredible Angela Mayora, who will be joining us as our guest reader. And we also have some really exciting events coming up. We have the Ultimate Experience 2-year anniversary in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, in January of 24. Today, I just bought my 2 tickets. So if you would like information on getting your tickets, please just type yes in the chat, and we'll make sure that we share that information of how to locate where to purchase your tickets. And we also have the upcoming Birmingham Ultimate Experience in May of 2024. And again, if you are interested in learning more about that Ultimate Experience, please type yes in the chat, and we would be more than happy, again, to share that information with you. And I don't know who knows about it, but we have an incredible Ultimate Coach YouTube channel that has so many golden nuggets in that channel. So I really encourage you to access it. There's some really great speeches that you can pull up and watch from the previous Ultimate Experiences that have already occurred. And we have the Ultimate Coach podcast. And that is an incredible team that hosts interviews of people that have read The Ultimate Coach and have had powerful impacts and transformations through the Book of Being. And we also have a LinkedIn channel, and they host once a month The Ultimate Coach, bringing being into business. And so that's also a very great call to jump on if you're interested in bringing being to business. So at this time, we will turn off cameras in just a moment and we will move to the after party. And what the after party is again, we just turn off the cameras and we allow the opportunity for deeper sharing if you feel like you would like to share more. And it is a beautiful safe space that we like to do that. So at this time, I would love to just invite you to take yourselves off mute and say hello, goodbye, see you soon. And for those of you that want to stay for the after party, that's where we'll be. Please join us there. So thank you
Bye,
so much for joining
everyone.
us tonight.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
Thanks, Teresa.
Bye.